Hi, I'm Peter Alsop, and our song to chew this week comes from my Christmas Holidays album. It's called The Tooth Fairy, Easter Bunny, Santa, and God. I know, sounds like a strange assortment, but they all have something in common. They're all stories. Stories that most of us have heard since we were little. All of these icons are a bit mysterious and require some level of belief that they exist, rather than simply showing themselves and proving to us that they're really real. Most likely we've had some contact with Santa, only to find out that he was really one of Santa's helpers, masquerading as the real Santa just to help him out. We've seen hints of their existence, from finding $1 under our pillow after leaving one of our teeth there when we went to sleep, to discovering an Easter basket at the end of our bed or Christmas presents under our tree on Christmas morning. Maybe there were even some cookie crumbs from the cookies and milk we left for him on Christmas Eve. These phantoms have been the source of great expectations and hopes for us, and at times have been the cause of great disappointments. Let's listen to our song to chew for today. We'll talk about it afterwards. Here now, from my Christmas Holidays album, is The Tooth Fairy, Easter Bunny, Santa, and God.
Back when Dad was little, in prehistoric times, the Tooth Fairy would take his tooth and leave my dad a dime. That's 10 cents a tooth. I don't know how my dad survived. Now with the cost of living, don't you think it's worth a $5?
There's an old story almost everyone believes about the Tooth Fairy trading money for their when a story has some spirit that touches you, you can hold it in your heart and make it true.
The Easter Bunny leaves an Easter basket by my head. I pig out on jelly beans when I get out of bed. Too many chocolate eggs, and I start to feel sick and think the Easter Bunny gets these things from a chocolate Easter chicken.
There's an old story almost everyone believes about the Easter baskets that the Easter Bunny leaves. When a story has some spirit that touches you, you can hold it in your heart and make it true.
Santa fills my stocking with games and Christmas toys. It's amazing he's so quiet, he never makes a noise. But why live at the North Pole where it's freezing cold all year? He could get a place in Malibu, go surfing with his deer.
There's an old story almost everyone believes about how Santa visits on Christmas Eve. When a story has some spirit that touches you, you can hold it in your heart and make it true. To think that God should stop by just to say hello, but then that never happened, so how am I supposed to know? I guess I know, 'cause when I stop and take the time to feel, my life just goes much better. That's how I know God's real. Yeah, there's an old story almost everyone believes spirit that touches you. You can hold it in your heart and make it true. When a story has some spirit that touches you, you can hold it in your heart and make it true.
There's an old story almost everyone believes, the chorus goes. And that's the power of stories. For hundreds of thousands of years, humans told stories to each other around the fire at night. Our stories were only different because of our different tribal locations and our local gods. They all address the same basic human questions. How do we stay safe? Where do we find food? Why does the moon change her shape with every passing night? We had stories about monsters and wild beasts and tricksters like coyote and fox and rabbit. Grim stories about what happens to little children who don't obey their parents. And at our joyous celebrations, we'd act our stories together. Our human brains have developed so we can hold every detail of a complicated story that's a half an hour long, but it's hard to remember one sentence of scientific or economic data even after we've read it over and over again. Our stories are how we pass our cultures on to our children. They're the basis of our theater and our religions. They are the fabric that holds us together as families, tribes, towns, and cities, states, and countries. We use them to make sense of our daily lives. But as the world changes, our old stories and beliefs are called into doubt, so we search for new stories. And I'm sure you've noticed that things are changing a lot these days, which is why we hear the word unprecedented so often. This is the time when conspiracy stories start to appear. Sometimes they're generated by honest attempts to explain what's really going on, and sometimes they're generated by those who want to shift existing structures of power, authority, and resources to benefit themselves personally, rather than to find stories that clarify and explain what's going on with our new changes. So, here's a spoiler alert. I'm going to speak with you parents and adults about why I wrote this song. You might want to pause this part and scoot the little ones away for a minute or two. There. Are we alone? Okay. I wrote this song because of a couple of realizations I had. After we kissed our daughter Willow goodnight once long ago, and told her the story about the tooth fairy as we carefully placed her little baby tooth that had finally fallen out under her pillow, I explained that while she was asleep, this magical sprite would come and take her tooth and in exchange leave her a special gift. She looked a little skeptical, but snuggled in and closed her eyes. We smiled to each other at how cute and excited she was and went to bed ourselves, only to be awakened early the next morning by an upset little girl with tears in her eyes, holding her little tooth in her little hand. Her mom and I looked at each other suddenly with the same accusatory thought. Oh, no! I thought you were going to take care of this. Oh, honey, I said to Willow as we hugged her. Maybe the tooth fairy had a really busy night last night. There were probably thousands of children who lost their teeth yesterday, and she couldn't get to all of them. We'll try again tonight, and I'm sure she'll come. Mom rolled her eyes at me. That night I kept getting up to check to make sure she was asleep, and finally, just after midnight, I noticed a little stream of drool on her cheek, so I knew it was safe. I put the dollar bill in my hand and slid quietly into her room. My plan was to very slowly slide my one hand under the pillow, locate the tooth, leave the dollar, and remove my hand with the tooth without a hitch. All went well, except I couldn't find the tooth. I searched so gently, and it didn't seem to be anywhere. Then, suddenly, Willow popped awake, sat straight up, grabbed my wrist, and exclaimed, "Gotcha, Dad! You're that tooth fairy, aren't you?" Well, I was I was filling in for her. She sent a note that said she was busy, and So I was caught by my daughter lying to her. Eventually, I came clean and explained to her about these wonderful stories that help create some of the magicalness of our childhoods. And yes, I was acting in place of the tooth fairy and the Easter bunny, and even Santa, but I could not say that they don't exist. It seems improbable, but just because I've never seen any of them doesn't mean that they're all fake. What I do know is that those stories are very strong and mostly wonderful, and that passing on a sense of wonder and fantasy to my kid is something that I want to do. And I believe it's the same with the story about God. I went through 12-step programs to help figure out how to live a more balanced life after growing up in an alcoholic home. I was told that it was a spiritual disease and that what I needed to do was to turn things over to my higher power. Well, as you can see, as God hadn't come down and said, "Hi, Peter, it's me, God, so you better do what I say or there's going to be problems," never happened. And if he's the Almighty, or she, or they, the story says it's a Trinity, right? Well, if they are Almighty, it would sure make it a lot less complicated if they had some direct communication with us so we could sort out what to believe and what not to believe. I mastered in religion as an undergraduate at Trinity College. There's that Trinity again. And one of the many things I learned is that if there's no doubt about something, then it's a fact. And there's no reason to hold a belief about it. It's just a fact. It seems that in religion, holding a belief is a major part of how religions work. And since I didn't believe that God really existed, I remembered a lesson I'd learned, that if you want to be a nice person and you're not a nice person, all you have to do is act like a nice person, and pretty soon you'll be a nice person. Made sense? So I thought I'd try that with my higher power. I made up a name for him, Harry Powers. And I made up that Harry was the Almighty and that he cared about me and gave me all sorts of challenges so I could learn how to be a better person. He also had a wicked sense of humor. He kept putting obstacles in my way just so I could figure out ways around them. And if I didn't learn a lesson once, he'd give me another chance to grow. For instance, I used to get impatient with people who move slower than I do. One of my 12-step sponsors suggested that I pray to Harry Powers to help me learn patience. I said, "What, are you kidding me? I'm not going to pray for that. If I pray for Harry to give me patience, what do you think he'll do? He'll put slow people in front of me all day long, so I have to practice patience. I'm not doing that." And then something amazing happened. I found that as I went through my days, having Harry Powers in my life made a real difference. My life seemed to go more easily. I liked myself better. Other people liked me better too. So it became clear to me that even though I had made him up, my life was better with Harry Powers in it. I even used to tell my audiences about this. And once, a boy in the audience shared, "That's right, Peter. God's name is Harold." I said, "Really? How do you know?" The boy replied, "It's in that prayer. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name." Everyone laughed. Then a man in the back shouted out, "I thought God's name was Andy." "Andy?" I asked. "And did he tell you this?" "Oh, of course not," the man said. "It's in the song. And he walks with me, and he talks with me, and he tells me I am his own." "Thank you, sir," I said. So when people ask me, "Do you believe that God exists?" I say, I think that's not a helpful question to ask, because if I say yes or no, the next thing that happens is someone wants to argue with me. I think a better question to ask is, do you have a story about God that helps you get through your life better? That uplifts you and helps you uplift others? And I think that reframing that question makes all the difference in the world. There are so many people in this world whose story about God is that he's vengeful and he has wrath and he often doesn't care about you if you break his rules. Even though he made us with free will and even though his only begotten Son died for our sins, he will still send us to hell if we mess up, according to some of the religious folks who claim to know what he wants. No thanks. I want to pick stories that work for me in my life. And as the song says, when a story has some spirit that touches you, you can hold it in your heart and make it true. That's plenty of chewing for today. I'm Peter Alsop. If you follow this podcast, I'll be back next week with another song to chew. Bye for now.